Ugg from Two Salt Travel here, and today I wanted to show you how to tie the Dirty Girl. This is a great egg-sucking leech imitation or baitfish imitation that's tied on a jig head hook. It's a really fun little pattern. Originally I designed it with the idea of fishing larger jig heads for ice fishing, and it actually worked really well on still water during the fall. So it's a neat little pattern. It's got a lot of weight, especially up at the head, and so it really, does this when it's jigged in the water. I like to fish this fly a lot when there's some wave action under bobber, and that gives it a really great jigging motion. Or again, you can jig it straight down below the boat, like when we do the dangling technique. It works great for that in the late summer and fall up here on our reservoirs and lakes up in northwest Colorado. Or you can tie this on a bigger hook and take it ice fishing when the lakes freeze over. So very versatile little fly. I hope you enjoy this video. Next, let's take a look at how to wind one of these up. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is start off by putting a hook in the vise. And this is the Voodoo custom tackle. This is their 1/16 round ball jig in orange, and I really like these hooks because they're 2x strong, so they're real strong. And then you'll notice that there's a little bit of paint inside of that eye there. Sometimes the powder coating on these jig heads closes that eye off a little bit. What you can do is heat up a paper clip or some other sharp point, and then you can, once that thing's really hot, don't hold it with your hands obviously, grab it with some pliers, but you can push that through there and that'll clear that opening if you run into a situation where you need to get that paint out of there. Because otherwise you can't just kind of chip through that stuff. You gotta burn through it. And you're gonna want to tie on with the some uni thread in black. This is 6/0, and so just tie in right behind the ball jig there, and build up a nice little base layer. Cut off your excess, and just build up with touching wraps, moving down the shank of the hook right to just in front of the bend of the hook. So roughly about 1/8 of an inch or so on the other side of that hook point there. And you are going to want to tie in a tail, and this premium buggerboo makes for some really nice tails. So let me pull one of those guys out of here, and I just kind of splay it out just a little bit to get rid of that tip in there. You can peel off some of these fibers here down towards the base of the tail, but that makes for a really nice looking tail right there. Get rid of maybe just a couple more of these fibers like so, and that makes for a real nice bushy tail. I like the way it kind of splays out. And so you want to go just a little bit past the hook, the length of the hook, so about a hook and a half ish, and then lay that on top. Use a nice loose wrap to cinch it down, and then just a few more wraps to really crank it on there, and then you can cut off your excess. Next, you're going to want some black crystal flash, and so grab a few strands of that, Let's do 2. I like it kind of sparse. So I'll grab 2 strands of crystal flash. I'm going to grab that around the thread, and I'll do this here on your side first. And just tie that in right on the side there. Right down to the base of where that tail starts. And then you can cut this off about the same length as your tail fibers. And then again on the other side. There we go. That pulled out. Whoopsies. A little malfunction there. I'm going to tie that back in. On your side. There we go. And then let me cut these off on this side here. Cool. And so you got a nice bushy tail with some flash in there. And I want to add some weight to this up near the jig head, so I'm going to add a little bit of 0.030 diameter lead. And I'm just going to do a little collar there right behind the jig head. And I can get rid of that excess by helicoptering it off. And I can kind of slide it over there close to the jig head. And this is a great time to take the thread forward and build up a little ramp until you can get up onto the lead wraps again. And you just want to cinch these lead wraps down to the hook. Right here I can build another little ramp until it gets up onto the lead wraps. I just don't want my marabou hackle that I'm going to use as a collar up there breaking off, because it slips down in between the wraps of that wire thread. And here I'm building up the diameter along the hook shank to where it is similar to the tail, just so you get sort of a uniform looking body. And so just kind of build that up until it looks something similar to about what you built up here at the tail. And then once you get it about where you like it, just has to be kind of close, you can add in your crystal hackle. And this is just black crystal hackle, and it has a direction. You can see if these fibers are going this direction here. If I pull against them, you can see how it stands them up like that. So I just want to go with the direction of the fibers here to the end. And once I get to the end, I can just tie that in. And bring that forward. Now I'm going to wrap that, and I'm going to palmer it back at the same time. Keep palmering those fibers, I should say, rearwards as I wrap forward. And then I'm going to wrap forward to just to the lead wraps right there. And then I can tie that off with one loose and then a couple to cinch it down, and then a couple behind. Alright, I just want to splay out that tail, because sometimes when you wrap that body material down over the tail, it can kind of compress it down, so you just want that to splay back out again. And now we're ready to palmer some of this marabou hackle on. And here I'm just using regular old strung blood quills, and I just want to get a pretty decent feather off of this clump. You know, I don't like it when it has sometimes it's kind of, they're matted together or mashed down or something like that. So I don't want that. I want a pretty sparse looking feather that's attractive looking to the eye. And so I can pull off this really gnarly stuff at the base of the feather there. And then I like to grab it by the tip right here. And I'm just going to expose this tip. And normally on like tails and stuff I'd cut that out, but here I want to actually tie that in right there. And I think I've just got too much, so I'm gonna take a little bit more off the base of this feather because I want to end up with somewhat of a sparse collar. And now let me go back to that tip again, and I'll splay those fibers out perpendicular to the stem there. And these are all kind of the short fibers, but they're getting longer. So right there I can tie this in by the tip. And just be careful when you tie this thing in that you don't break it, because they're kind of fragile. And then I can cut my excess tip off right there. Now grab this with your hackle pliers, because you just want to be careful as you're doing this, and you don't want to pull too hard on it as you, whoa, hello, dropped it. As you go forward there and around, just palmer these hackle fibers. Whoops, I pulled it right out of there. Let me tie that in again. It helps if you don't drop it. Let's splay that back, expose some of that tip, and then tie that stem in. And again, be careful you don't crank it down so hard that you break it. And then let me grab it with the hackle pliers again. Okay, we're ready to go. And now I'm just, as I go around carefully, I don't want to yank on that thing too hard. Just splay those fibers rearward as you wrap forward towards the jig head until you run out of fibers, and then you're left with just the stem, and then you can crank that thing down with a few turns and cut your stem off. Now, since those feathers have a tendency to, that hackle can come unwound pretty easily, I like to wrap back with the thread to about where I started palmering those feathers, and you can see how that compresses them and pushes them rearward, just like that, and that looks perfect. And that'll also, that thread will kind of help hold those guys so that that thing doesn't come unwound every time it gets hit by the tooth of the fish. Okay, and so the last step is to put a nice little collar on this thing, and I like to use Senyo laser dub in brown, just kind of a different color than the black that I've been using. And I'm going to put that on there as a dubbing loop. So I'm going to hook the thread with my pinky finger. I'm going to give myself about 5 or 6 inches. And I'm going to go back around the shank of the hook and then around the thread, those 2 pieces of thread. And then bring that right back to where your marabou is starting. And then now take a clump of this laser dub, like so, like a pretty decent sized clump. And before I do that, actually, to keep all those marabou feathers from getting all clumped up in my dubbing, I can put this straw on there and kind of contain that marabou hackle like so. And so now I can put excuse me, this dubbing in between those two pieces of thread, and I'm just going to start stacking it in there. And one on top of the other, and I'm going to keep stacking this and building this brush up until I get quite a good bit of material on there, like so. And then here I can just pinch this with my fingers. I'll spin a few times with my left hand, and that'll just kind of hold those fibers in place while I grab my tool. And this is my spinning tool, and it's got these little shepherd ends on there that I can grab a hold of that, and now I can start spinning that material, and it'll just capture that material, and it almost will turn it into like a little noodle there. And you don't have to crank this thing too hard, otherwise you can break the thread. But once you get a little noodle going there, take your dubbing brush and just start combing that out. And you want to get rid of that dense core down at the thread and get those fibers to pull outward away from the core. And it forms a nice little kind of woolly like collar. There's a couple little spots right there where it's just a little bit dense. But basically something like that. And grab it with my hackle pliers and cut it free from the tool, the spinning tool. And then as I wrap this around the hook, I just want to make sure that I palmer these fibers rearward, and I want to just build up a nice, thick head behind this jig head. I can build it up pretty good right up to the head. But I don't want to overly crowd it, so just be careful you don't get too much of that dubbing brush right up there that you don't have enough room to throw a whip finish in there. So once I cinch that down and get it all kind of cranked down, I can cut off my excess here nice and close, and then sometimes I like to just get in there with my fingernails and just compress that material down, especially kind of right there where I finished. Just get a little separation between the that jig head and your collar. And now's a great time to go ahead and whip finish. If I see my whip finish tool somewhere around here, there we go. And then just give her a whip finish. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I like to crank those in there, get them nice and tight. And then do another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just we want this fly to be durable. And then before I put some super glue in there, I'm actually just gonna brush this outward here so I can give it a little trim. And so this is the distance right here between your hook point and the shank of the hook here is called your gape. And so I want to be about 2 hook gapes is what I want to cut that off, and then you can just kind of pull that material out and just go around the fly and trim down that collar pretty equally. And that's pretty good like that. And at this point, I can give it a brush back, and I just want to comb those fibers rearward towards the tail. Basically, that's looking pretty good right there. Sometimes you might get it kind of spun in there, and you can pick those fibers out if it looks kind of silly. Just want it to look professional. And then lastly, just throw a little bit of super glue on this thing right at the thread wraps, so that it really locks those wraps together, and hopefully you've got, you know, a really durable little fly that will last all day long. You know, catch dozens of fish on that one fly. That's the idea, at least. Just really coat those wraps really good. Get it in there. And that is the Dirty Girl. A great little jig head pattern, imitates leech or bait fish. And this is also a great ice fishing jig as well. So I use this on still water in the fall when there's lots of leeches out and fish are being real aggressive as winter is approaching. But then you can continue to fish this through the winter. If you like to ice fish, tie these up on jig heads. Like 1/8 of an inch works really good. And then even in the summertime, if you want to fish this in rivers, you can use the same jig hook, but Voodoo makes one all the way down to 1/80th. So they've got some really small little jig heads, and they make for fantastic leech patterns. So if you enjoyed this video, please hit subscribe on my channel, and that way you'll get notifications when I upload new videos for fly tying or instructional videos for fly fishing. Thank you very much.